Systematic breakdown like you dancing. Camera and a gun shooting two different kind of cannons.
I really wanted a chance to bring in an actual lawyer to kind of explain some basic things, because I started off my series doing economics, but then I realized quickly that if you don't have a strong legal base, economics kind of goes out the window fast. And just to preface that, we all love football. When the first draft pick hits, the first thing he has to do is call a legal consultant to write out the contract, and that person takes a percentage of his pay before he ever hits the field, because that person is not competent legally to write the contract.
Well, my name is Jared. I'm from Florence, Alabama. Graduated from Bradshaw High School back in 2000. Went to Florida A&M University for undergrad, and then I went back to the University of Alabama for law school. Practiced for about 5 years, and I got out of it. But really excited about the opportunity to be here and kind of share a little bit of what I know with you guys, and maybe I can learn something back from y'all. So thank you, Devon, for putting me on this opportunity.
We don't want to start in the advanced version right out the gate. We'll lose a lot of people. So the first thing I want to do is, this is a constitution. So I always kept one of these like in my adult life, because a lot of people have whatever holy book it is that you believe, and you live your life by it. Well, if you're in this country, regardless of how you believe it or perceive it, this is what you're governed by. So this is kind of like the basic rule book. And I think anybody, in our community, once they hit 13 and you're able to be tried as an adult, I think you should have some understanding of the Constitution. So if you was to commit a crime or some kind of infraction, this is what you're going to be based on. And the first episode, what I really wanted to harp on was, as soon as you hit the courtroom, the first thing the judge is going to say is, ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
Correct.
So we'll start there. I know it has an actual legal term, but I'll let you explain a little bit more about that and why ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
The easiest way to think about it is the law assumes that you know what it is. I would say 98 to 99% of the time, it does not matter what you know about the law, only that you are governed by the law. There are some very, very, very rare instances where you kind of have to know what you're doing, but essentially, especially when you're talking about criminal conduct, it's pairing a action, like something you physically do, with a mentality, like what were you thinking at the time that you carried out that act. And as you can see, I didn't say the word law in any of that. So that's how it governs that. But even outside of the criminal context, there are things that involve social liability, civil liability, monetary liability, that all are based off of what you do and what you're thinking at the time that you're doing it, or what you don't do, or what you didn't think at the time. So that's why you're absolutely right that it doesn't matter what you know, it matters more so what you do. But you have to understand this to get an understanding of what you can and cannot do, or what the consequences are.
Right. Because I know, like, with everything that I've done in my adult life as it regards to law or economics, when you go to get a house, there's somebody who draws up the long legal contract, and that's where a majority of your upfront money goes, is for that financier and that lawyer to draw up all the paperwork that you're signing in blue ink, not black, that you sign when you get ready. And as soon as you get done, they say, now you have to go homesteaded, which means you have to find more legal paperwork, or everything that you just did goes right out the window, and you have to pay those fees again. So also in running business for myself, before I could do anything, the property manager says, where's your paperwork? So you have to present yourself in law before you can even commence into commerce. So explain a little bit about that process and why it's so important to have good legal standing when you get ready to make financial moves as regards to assets.
Okay, so when you're buying a home, okay, depending upon the type of loan that you're getting, unless you're buying it straight cash, and even if you are buying it straight cash, you got to have somebody to make sure that the deed is properly written, so that you're actually getting something that has legal value, legal ownership. You've got to make sure that the person selling it to you has the right and privilege to sell it to you. You'd be surprised how many people sell houses that don't belong to them, or they're not authorized to sell. So having your paperwork right is just absolutely, I mean, there's no way to do effective business without it. And so, you're talking about running a business, because we have, state laws and local laws that govern, okay, well, you can open up this type of business, but you can only have so many people inside of it, or we have to inspect it to make sure that it's up to code, like fire provisions, safety, like if you're opening a restaurant, cleanliness. I mean, those little notices that you see with the health score that a business got, chances are a lawyer was involved in that process, whether a lawyer drafted the document and for them to be scored by, or a lawyer defended the process in terms of how that particular restaurant got evaluated. So the law is just as much a part of everyday life as anything we do or say. So you got to have your stuff together.
All right, so I just wanted to go over, since we did show the Constitution, go over the definition of the Constitution, which reads, a body of fundamental principles or established precedents according to which a state or other organization is acknowledged to be governed. So I guess in a nutshell, my interpretation of that is just, if you're dealing as a business, you have a charter. A country or a governing body has a constitution, and this tells other governing bodies how they are to do business or approach or actually perceive or accept them, what lines and guidelines they'll be dealing with. Kind of like just the general rules of admission. So I'd like to let you explain a little bit more about that definition from your point of view.
So, within kind of like what you were saying, whenever you're trying to form any type of legal entity, whether it's a country, whether it's a business, whether it's a corporation, whatever, you have to establish the rules that you're going to agree to play by. And so when the founding fathers were, during the process of the American Revolution, were trying to figure out, well, this is what we don't like about being ruled by Great Britain. This is what we can learn from them in terms of how to run a country. Because, Great Britain had been around for, centuries and practically ruled the entire world, or at least most of it. So, despite the political and ideological differences they had, there's stuff to learn. And so what they tried to do with that document was to set some playing rules that were effectively American while borrowing the best aspects of British culture or British politics. So that's where you see like the two-party system, like Republicans and Democrats. Some of the things, about property ownership and rights, although, they screwed it up when they first started it, but that's another story. But they were essentially laying the framework for what our world looks like today. And actually, the taking away the negative aspects of what they did, they were geniuses because they created something in a time where, there was no internet, there was no electricity, there was no real way of communicating with people outside of yelling outside your door or traveling to see them. And they've got something that is, for the most part held up 200 plus years later, in how completely different the world is than what it was back in the 1700s. So.
Yeah.